Hi everybody, I hope you guys are having an incredible Sunday. First of all, thank you so much for being here again and welcome to day 8 of our 31-day challenge. It's been an amazing week and we really got through a lot, and thank you so much for joining, all of you that have been religiously coming and meditating and really being dedicated to connecting with yourself on a daily basis. It's been so inspiring to see, and also really keeps me focused on what is important and what's next to provide, which is really beautiful. I really love your feedback and your questions and all the things that you've always want to ask. So it helps me provide the content and information that you need to help support your journey, because of course this is for you. So today I want to talk about a really important topic, which is the key, the essential key to understanding how to leave this matrix multiverse. Okay, and I talk about the matrix multiverse in terms of the design of the structure of reality that we're in, physical and non-physical. And it's important for us, and the only way to really understand all of this is by coming into a very clear understanding of what we are as human beings, as this organism of consciousness. And the more you meditate and the more you connect with yourself and the more that you practice and work on integration, the more that you are stuck in the external world instead of the internal world, you will not be able to really see this design of the universe. It really requires the inner work and the integration and doing that work for you to really understand what this universe looks like, because the design that is external is exactly what's inside. Now, everyone's experience is going to be unique, what the way they experience things, the way they see things. Everyone's personal spiritual evolution is very unique, but we begin to look at some parallels in the design of awakening, or if there were to be some kind of templates of layers of consciousness when it becomes aware. There's certain templates that on a mass scale, a lot of us that go through these journeys of waking up and coming up from that meditation self, from becoming conscious of those aspects of ourselves that we share in common. And so from that perspective, it's like we are tapping into a language, the language of consciousness, of becoming aware of this human organism that is unspoken. And it's something that some of these things that I'm sharing with you, you really can't find in books. You can't find it outside. You have to be able to go within and really experience for yourself this kind of work in order for you to identify and acknowledge these kinds of steps, the progression of becoming conscious in these experiences. And so that being said, what I'm going to share with you is basically exactly what we're looking at, okay? I'm going to be sharing with you the design of this matrix multiverse. So let's take a look at it. I want to talk about fragmentation, because fragmentation is the absolute key to understanding what happens to this soul when it enters into the three-dimensional plane, when it enters into this matrix multiverse that we live in. And it's also going to help you understand why I call it the matrix multiverse. Now, let's go back to the origin, as I always like to explain, the seeding of life, or when life is coming into the physical dimension. It is a soul, and the soul, the origin of the soul is source, is that source which is that infinite consciousness. And we relate to infinite consciousness to the color white light, because that's the best way for us to understand white light, which holds within it many different fragments of color. When light is going through a prism, it separates into fragments of color. And so those fragments of color are basically all of the aspects, the potential, the infinite possibilities that are within that white light. So imagine it that way, okay? Just visualize this concept this way. And so soul, the source, this infinite consciousness, which then allows that white light to come in through, it is from there is the origin of the soul, of that infinite consciousness. When it enters the three-dimensional plane, then it is basically captured, that infinite consciousness, by that soul. Or the soul is like the envelope or the vessel that is holding on to that infinite consciousness. And that infinite consciousness then projects as it comes into the three-dimensional plane, again, just like that fragmentation that occurs when white light goes through a prism. That infinite consciousness has to organize itself in the human body. And so it is organized within the chakras, and you've heard me talk about that a lot. The chakra system is like the rainbow scale of vibrational frequency that's holding on to each level of those rays of information. Okay, it's the best way for that information to be organized within the physical body. So the design of the universe and the design of this infinite consciousness is that every organism is a fractal of this source. Okay, so that means that whether it's good or bad, whether it's a positive manifestation of that infinite source or a negative manifestation, the only thing that differentiates the two of these living organisms is their own awareness of themselves. Okay, their own awareness of themselves, of their own consciousness. That is what differentiates the manifestations of life, whether they're high vibration or low vibration. Now, every dimensional plane has a different way in which the manifestation of this consciousness develops or manifests itself. In a three-dimensional plane, we abide by the law of three, which is the law of creation, which we are creating this three-dimensional law. We are utilizing the divine feminine, the masculine. We come into this dualistic aspect of creation in order to create life. And so that's the basic law of all creation that we're sharing here. Because every organism is a fractal of infinite consciousness, it helps us understand how everything is kind of working in terms of even our own evolution, even our own spiritual evolution. So because this infinite consciousness is fragmenting when it comes into the three-dimensional plane, the soul also is going to experience a fragmentation. And this fragmentation will happen on multiple layers of the body, of this physical and non-physical body. So it's important for us to understand how fragmentation occurs so that we understand how integration works. Because the whole point of coming into this three-dimensional plane is that we then reintegrate ourselves so that we can go back into that white light, into that source state outside of this three-dimensional plane, coming back into that wholeness, which is source, which is who we are. And basically, the whole function of source is for it to become aware of itself through all possibilities, right? It is that infinite source which it's becoming aware. That's its journey, that's its expression. And so we are a fractal of that expression. So inherently in our design as this organism that is this much larger organism, soul, that comes into the three-dimensional plane, it is within our design to return back to that infinite consciousness. But what happens when the soul comes into the three-dimensional plane, when it comes into a matrix that is designed in a sense to limit and suppress this consciousness becoming aware of itself? Why do I say that it's suppressing? We take a look at the structure of our reality just in our current world, in our current society, and everything that we have set up is extremely compartmentalized in order to create this illusion of separation. And so just that alone in itself is showing us that there is a design that is trying to pull us away from what is natural. And what is natural is the integration, to come into this three-dimensional plane, experience it, becoming aware of itself through all possibilities, good, bad, no judgment on any of those. The concept of identifying one of those as good and bad is something that is kind of indoctrinated in our programming in the matrix. But in reality, these are just natural ranges of consciousness or the lack of consciousness that we're experiencing in this three-dimensional plane. And so it's important to understand that, because even in our own life, we get very pulled away from those natural laws of creation and natural understanding of what we are as a manifestation of that infinite consciousness. And that causes a tremendous amount of confusion, because we believe that we have to be only in one lane or behaving in certain ways. And of course, we're talking about programming. We're indoctrinated with many different programs in this society and the world that we are born into, in this world that we are living in, that we are believing very much in the separation of a lot of things. Okay, we see everything black and white, and we forget that inherently within us is that understanding of coming back to that wholeness, which is really the key to coming back into that whole self. So here's the problem with that. When we experience and when we forget, when we get so separate from the divine self, that connection to what we are, to our soul, we lose track. We completely get lost in the external plane. We get lost within the external plane and completely become disconnected from that whole self that is inherent. It's an inherent design of us. And so when we're going through our spiritual awakening, we go through a tremendous amount of waves of, levels of realization, where we experience unity and separation and unity. And we can go through these levels many times until we come to the layers that are unpacking all of the programs that have created within us this illusion of separation that is very, very deep. It is so deep that it's subconsciously programmed, emotionally ingrained in us, and it basically makes up our entire perception of how we see ourselves and the world around us. So it takes patience and a lot of time and dedication to sit down and meditate and really address all of those programs until we find our own truth. And our journey to finding that truth is always going to be, quite different. It can be unique. But the bottom line, the one thing that we find sooner or later in our spiritual evolution is that we are that one. We are one unity consciousness. We are one fragmentation of a whole. And each one of those particles, let's say, or aspects of fragmentation is a fractal of infinite consciousness. A fractal means that it's a small scale of an exact replica of a whole. So that means that within you, there is the understanding of this entire matrix multiverse. And firsthand, through my meditation, without having any, reading any books about this, or even in my pranic healing training and quantum healing training, and even in my shamanic training, these kinds of truths, really, we don't have access to it unless you go inside and you really unpack those layers and experience for yourself that unity within you as a whole to everything. And it takes time. It will happen after you deprogram all of the concepts of separation. Okay, so now we talked about that. Now let's go a little bit deeper. What happens to the body, this soul that then attaches? So infinite conscious attaches to a soul. The soul is part of this matrix in the three-dimensional plane. Okay, because the soul is the vessel that is encapsulating that infinite consciousness in order to allow it to travel and experience all of the things that we're experiencing. When the soul comes in, that soul level, the next level down is the spirit, right? And so that's the definition of all of these experiences and possibilities that come in. So that level, the spirit level, or the spirit layer of this organism, of the human body, is then when we tap into the Akashic records. And the Akashic records is the record keeper for all of the experiences that all humankind has experienced in this three-dimensional matrix, in this physical plane. Okay, so that's why people sometimes connect to that. However, through time, a lot of the access even to these planes for the human has become hijacked. It's become hijacked many different ways. Even the human has to really, really activate and practice discernment when connecting up to these Akashic planes and these planes of collective information. Because in the same way that we are coming into our awakening, another thing that happens, the next layer down, is that the human body, the soul itself, experiences a fragmentation. And so what's going to happen is that the couple ways that I can explain it to you is, first of all, a web. It's like a spider's web. And whatever part is at the center of that web is the aspect of yourself that is consciously aware of itself. Okay, and yet you are interconnected to this web. Every point of the web is an aspect, it's a fragment of yourself. And those fragments have no linear timeline. It is one whole organism. So let's break it down. The human soul is fragmented when it comes into the levels. On the spirit level, the spirit layer of your body, of your real body, your extended energetic non-physical body, we have fragmentation, which is interconnecting us with other human organisms, because again, we are one. But we are fragmented through the different experiences that we experienced while incarnating and leaving and reincarnating this reincarnation cycle. So every round that we take in this incarnation cycle, as through the vessel of the soul, fragmentation can occur. And fragmentation is actually one of the most essential aspects to keeping the soul entrapped in the cyclical reincarnation cycle. How does fragmentation occur? Fragmentation occurs when we are when the soul experiences trauma, when we experience trauma of any kind. Okay, and trauma can be anything from somebody gives you a dirty look and you feel helpless. It's any kind of thought form that is taking you away from the unity consciousness and coming in to that 0 point, which means integration of your own self, of your own consciousness, the awareness of that consciousness. So any experience that makes you feel confused and disconnected from your wholeness and your awareness is considered trauma on this level. Okay, what happens? What happens when we experience trauma? The soul is fragmented, literally. Okay, and so, for example, you can experience hundreds of experience throughout your life in which you're fragmented. Can you imagine? And again, all of these templates of information, if you look at the Akashic record or if you look at your DNA records, which is actually holding on to all of this fragmentation, it's going to happen in all the different lifetimes that you've had. So just think back to your childhood, things that occurred. All of the fearful moments and trauma that occurred creates fragmentation of aspects of your soul. And so when we talk about integration, it is necessary for us to go back to those moments and address those the untruths. Okay, the untruths. And the untruths we define as getting caught up in the illusion. Okay, we define what's true and what's untrue by understanding the natural laws of our human manifestation. And the human manifestation, the natural law of us, as I just explained it, is to come back into that whole, to that 0 point. So anything that causes this soul, this human experience to fragment would then be an experience of the lack of consciousness. Okay, so here's the thing. So when we talk about what's true and what's not true, it's not that we're questioning the validity of the experience. We are observing our observation through the filter of separation. Okay, that's something that you need to understand. It's only the filter of separation. The filter of separation is always going to take us off and confuse us because we're not really looking at the whole truth of a certain experience. When we experience trauma, we can only experience it through our perception. But it takes the ability to go back to those experiences to understand really what are everything that is experienced. Who else played a part in that experience? We understand the role of a mother, role of a father, brother, sister, partner, whatever it is, whoever played a role in any experience. We need to learn to become aware of each one of those players so that we can begin to understand the different roles and the different aspects. Why? Because as infinite consciousness becoming aware of itself through all experiences, all of these organisms, me and you, sitting right here listening to this, we are interconnected. And we come together like organisms by matching our vibrational frequency. Okay, so my entire whole signature, vibrational signature, is a match to your vibrational signature. And that's what brought you here today to connect with me. So the language that we're reading here is a very loud, complex, very substantial language, which defines how we interconnect with one another, how we experience life. So everything that binds our experiences means that my vibrational match was the same for my mother, for example, or father or partner. And all of those experiences that I've had, even the choice of incarnating in this family, for example, is a vibrational match that is pre-designed prior to you coming into your life. Okay, so how do we choose what life we're coming into as a whole organism before you come into this spirit and physical plane? As a soul within the cyclical matrix, it's a vibrational frequency that is defined by those experiences that you've experienced prior, and it attaches to the next frequency that is required as a match to that experience. So every life that we have, every life that we're reincarnating is basically a possibility for evolution. But at the same time, if we are learning or not learning the same lessons over and over again, there's a problem, right? So this is where we begin to look at the matrix or the reincarnation trap that we talk about, because we talk about that your soul is entrapped in a reincarnation cycle. The trap, and this is debatable, people have different perspectives on this. In my opinion, we're talking about the lack of consciousness. Your natural design down to your DNA is the ability to evolve. That's the natural design of your organism and of this entire matrix multiverse. It is your job to become aware. But if you continue in each lifetime to get caught up in the physical aspect of this, it's very difficult for you to come back into that unity consciousness, into that awakened self, in which you can then choose to leave this reincarnation cycle. And so really every lifetime we have our mind wiped, we forget, right? And that is the design of this matrix, and that's why they call it a reincarnation trap. There are certain things that occur in this reincarnation trap. One of them is fragmentation. Fragmentation through trauma is the most powerful way to keep you entangled in this matrix, so that you have to continue reincarnating. Why? Because when someone comes fragmented, then we come into the structures of the law of mirroring one another through contractual agreements. We make contractual agreements through karma. We have the word karma, which means simply cause and effect. Everything that we do results in an effect. It results in something that we're doing. So all of the things that we choose, all our choices that we're making in this lifetime, this one lifetime that we have in the reincarnation cycle, defines the journey of your soul. That's why coming into conscious awareness is potentially the most important thing that you can do in order to liberate yourself from this matrix multiverse. Now, it's not to say that there's something terribly wrong with this matrix multiverse, because we live in duality. This is duality, and duality is natural. It's the natural laws of this physical dimension. However, one of the things that we notice within the reincarnation cycle is the infringement on free will. Okay, so the question is, well, did I make the decision to come in? Did I make the decision to come into this matrix or not? Which one is it? At what point does this soul decide to incarnate and get stuck into this reincarnation cycle? And so that's the question that each one of us has to take time to understand and see what our contractual agreement is with coming into this physical plane. Now, this opens up another topic that's a little larger that we'll try to address some other time. But the thing, it goes into the aspect of souls and contractual agreements with our collective, right? The collective consciousness, if some of us have already left the reincarnation, supposedly, gone up to higher dimensions, maybe 12, 9, 10, 11, 13 dimension, and then come back in order to assist fragments of ourselves here, that can also be. Okay, so there's a lot of different aspects that we need to understand, but we unpack that by going inside and really deprogramming first from the matrix, which should be the basic. It's 101. Spirituality 101 is to completely begin to deprogram from the matrix so that you can begin to move. And your ability to become consciously aware is not just in the waking time. The kind of work that you're doing with the people that you've contracted with in this current lifetime, friends, family, and all of those, is first step. Then you got to go into dream time, because in dream time you're also working on other levels with other beings, other souls, other contractual agreements. Your other fragments become aware during dream time. Okay, and so this is where we come into the concept of interdimensional contact, okay, where we have ETs and star seeds and star families and our alien aspects of ourselves. The fragmentation that occurs when the soul comes into the 3D matrix can manifest into a multiple range of species, which, you know, we define them in this current lifetime as whatever they are, whatever names we apply to them, but all it is manifestations of consciousness, and it is fragmentation of ourselves. This takes me to another part which is really important. Fragmentation that happens within us is manifesting to us and interacting with us. We are ultimately the creator of all experiences that we have. Whether we are consciously aware of that or not, it will define how you're experiencing things. But this comes into the topic of guides and interdimensional contact. Everything, every experience, conscious and non-conscious, is a projection of our own mind. That's the law of this holographic universe that we're living in, multiverse, okay? Because it's not just this, we are extending, our fragments can extend in multiples. The idea of a universe is just from our own earth mind, which is quite limited. That's the only way that we can possibly define these organisms of consciousness that we're interconnected with, okay? But as you connect with your angels or other beings or your guides, for example, even those guides are projections of yourself. And don't forget that when we connect with these guides or these angels or these beings, any being, as a projection of your own self, it is also based on your vibrational frequency. Okay, so it's very important. So we might evolve through guides throughout our life, or maybe we'll stick with one guide throughout. Maybe we were an old soul and we've been here a long time and we master working with our guides. So we know, you know, who our team is or who our connections are. And so those are the ones that we're going to be working with. But it's very important to understand this, because sometimes I notice a confusion and, you know, with the guide thing. And some people see maybe Jesus or some of the these beautiful manifestations of light that we've seen, and then end up going down a wrong path or getting carried off their path. And this is where discernment is incredibly important, because aside from what we're projecting, just because we're projecting into a reality doesn't mean that other conscious life forms are not trying to infringe on our free will, right? So when someone has a lack of consciousness, the more lack of consciousness awareness that they have, the more they're going to come into a parasitic consciousness kind of behavior. And so that means that they are going to want to infringe on your free will to feed off of you or to take from you life force, consciousness, awareness, it can be anything. And so that's when we come in to, developing illnesses, or, we end up having attachments, entities, walk-ins. Any number of interactions with interdimensional consciousness can occur when we are not consciously aware of our vibrational frequency, okay, and how the matching occurs. That vibrational match will happen physical and non-physical. That's something that we need to become aware of. So when we start, also channeling is very interesting, because we can tap in to some of these beings and begin to transmit information. And some of this information can sound like it's the right thing, but you really need to listen. You need to listen from the place of knowing the basic laws of creation, because if you don't know those laws, it can be very easy to be confused. And something that is happening, in our current state where we're at here in evolution, is that in a way spirituality is also being weaponized against us. And it's happening not just on the physical plane, but it's happening on the highest planes. That even when we try to connect, the layers of our ability to connect based on our vibrational frequency can very easily be hijacked or limited or controlled. So we need to become a very clear, clean vessel in which we're connecting to our divine source with a very strong connection without any confusion. One of the biggest ways to disconnect is by the doubt that we have in ourselves. So we always have to trust, have faith, understand. And being in that observer point, you have a very great ability to kind of observe all of the interactions that you have with all living beings while in this plane, okay? And my invitation with this information is that you understand that to heal fragmentation, or to not necessarily heal, but to reintegrate from that fragmentation, it's to go back to all of those fragments of yourself and to come back and understand what is true, okay? And how I define what's truth is by understanding truth is like the integration of a whole, okay? So if you want to understand what truth is, you understand what yin and yang is, the divine feminine, the divine masculine. You must integrate both. You have to understand both energies, and how they manifest themselves within ourselves emotionally, physically, and in the material plane. We have to understand the duality very well to understand how fragmentation occurs, because the concept of separation happens when we begin to separate these two aspects and we make them black and white, and we don't see where they merge. That's where a lot of the confusion comes from. So we have to define and understand how to remerge from the concepts of fragmentation. And that's how you know how to heal a certain experience, okay? So integration of the soul, which is something that I do in my DNA reprogrammings, and I'm sure a lot of you have already been researching ways to do that, is very important. What we talk about, what we're really doing, is we're going back to those experiences where we have experienced trauma, and we heal ourselves, providing ourselves the whole picture. Again, that if your perspective during that trauma is an imbalanced masculine, then we have to provide the balanced feminine and rebalance that, okay? So that's kind of, in layman's terms, a simple way that I can explain it, but I'm going to address this even more in other films and other videos that I do, okay? So that's a quick way for you to understand, and I really love to invite your questions regarding this. I know it's a big topic, it's very complex, but it's incredibly important. Now, I want to end this with letting you know that fragmentation occurs when we come into a state of fear, in a state of panic. The best way to fragment an entire human race is by bringing them into a state of complete helplessness and disconnect from themselves. So please remember that your ability to come back to yourself, to back to your whole, is the most powerful way. Forget just this lifetime. As a soul, in order for you to evolve, we need to start thinking bigger. I know that we get lost in the physical plane and we get lost in all these little things that are happening, but we are a collective, one. And when we do work, I say this a lot, when you do your work, you are healing your entire ancestral lineage. That's how interconnected we are. And even me and you, just 2,000 years ago, you and I had a relative in common. Me and you. And some of you haven't even met yet. Right? So it's very interesting. We all come from this one whole self. That's a fact. So in that case, all the work that we're doing helps us heal collectively. Very good. So I'm going to take you through a really quick meditation, my loves. And how much time do I have? I know that I kind of went on a long time with this, but it's really important. So let's all close our eyes. I'm going to show you an example of how to reintegrate the fragment of your soul. Inhale deeply and exhale. I'm gonna go through this quite quick because a lot of you already are familiar with my techniques, and I invite you to slow this down later, and you're gonna do it with more time because you're gonna definitely need more time. Sometimes it can take an hour to 2 hours to get to the core of what we're gonna be doing, okay? So I invite you, please, to take that time. So you're gonna ground yourself. You're gonna protect yourself in your sphere. Visualizing, becoming aware of your space. You're going to begin by closing the first chakra. We're going to ground the space that we're in. We're going to create a gigantic sphere around the space that we're in, protecting the environment in which we're going to be healing and doing this work. You must always protect your space because, as I mentioned, we're always surrounded and sharing space with all kinds of interdimensional beings at all times. Okay, so you're going to just becoming aware of your space. Okay, you're going to now fill your space with the color gold as you raise the frequency of the environment that you're in. Very good. You're going to go up to the sacral chakra, the orange light. Go ahead and close that chakra all the way down. Go up to the solar plexus, the yellow light. You're going to close that chakra all the way down to the sides of a dime. You're going to go up to your heart chakra. Open that chakra as wide as possible. You're going to go up to your throat chakra. Go ahead and open that chakra as wide as possible, front and back. You're going to go up to your third eye. Go ahead and open that chakra as wide as possible. You're going to go up to your crown chakra. Go ahead and fill it in with your creative color. Okay. Now that you're here, I want you to visualize pulling up a powerful wave of green energy that comes rushing up into the body, creating a vortex of energy. Go ahead and visualize that green energy coming into the body. From source, you're going to visualize bringing down a powerful wave of gold energy that comes down through the crown of your head, combining with that green earth energy. So you're running energy. You're going to send 10% back down to the center of the earth. Green and gold goes back down to the center of the earth. You're going to take 80%, goes back up your crown chakra, and you're going to create a fountain coating the outside of your sphere. Visualize coating the outside of your space. You're clearing your environment, clearing the matrix illusion, releasing yourself of any toxic manifestations of friends, events, environments, clearing your space. You're going to go back to your solar plexus. You're going to pull up that final 10% up your spine, and from your arms, you're going to fill the inside of your bubble. Really fill your space with that green and gold energy, healing your body, okay? This is helping heal the body and also flush out all of the things energetically that we're going to be clearing. Very good. So you're going to feel that energy moving through your body. I want you now to tap into your emotions, and we enter the plane of the non-physical through our physical body, and the language that begins to enter into the non-physical is the emotions. So I want you to tap into the emotions that you've been feeling over the past week, over the past day. Go ahead and select one of those emotions that have really come up, that has really triggered you over the past 24 hours. Go ahead and tap into that. Okay. After you identify this emotion, you're going to notice where in your body it's located. That's going to tell you a lot about what parts of you are being affected by that emotion. So tap into the part of the body. Focus on that emotion, and I want you to be present with the emotion, which means that you're going to feel it. You're going to really feel it. You're going to even experience it, and it might trigger some reactions from you. At first, I want you to allow yourself to feel the emotion. Go ahead and feel it. And then, okay, without letting yourself get too caught up in the feeling body of that emotion, that's good. You're going to keep that for another practice. But for this practice, I just want you to come into the state of observation. Okay, now come up and observe the emotion in your body. So notice, what does that emotion want to do in your body? And I want you to ask yourself, how familiar are you with this emotion in your life? How often does that emotion trigger you? How often does it come up? Okay, even within the past 24 hours, I can guarantee that the emotion that you've been feeling and coming up is something that's been cyclical for a long time in your life. And this is what's very interesting about this. So what I want you to do is, now that you've identified this emotion and the fact that you've experienced it and you're quite familiar with this emotion, I want you to take yourself back, as far back as you can, to the very first time that you've experienced that emotion. Okay, and this is the part that's going to probably take a lot of you more time to sit down and connect with, but see how far you can go with me now. So go ahead and go back to the very first time that you've experienced this emotion in your life and see what memories it triggers and brings up. Some of you might go straight to the childhood. Some of you might go back to the womb. Some of you might go back to last week. So go ahead and just go back to that. And it really doesn't, it matters, but for this practice, it's going to tell you something very interesting, okay? So as you go back to this memory, take yourself there. And the first thing I want you to do is I want you to identify who is there with you in this event. Who is there? I want you to notice who's triggering you. Okay? And when you have a moment, you're going to write down if it is a man or a woman that is triggering you, first of all. Okay, notice, is it a man or a woman that's triggering you? Okay. And I want you to tap into your emotions. What is it that you're feeling? I want you to write down the feelings that come up. Just remember them. Just become aware of them. Okay? And as you identify those emotions, I want you to identify which one is the strongest one. Now that you've identified which one is the strongest one, I want you to identify where in your body you're feeling it. Wherever in your body you're identifying right now, this is where your cords are connecting you to this person that you're interacting with, whether it's a man or a woman or multiple people. So I want you to notice that, first of all, okay? So the cords that are connecting you to the person that you're experiencing this with are the cords of fragmentation. At the other end of this is a fragment of yourself, a part of yourself, a piece of yourself that is left in this exchange. And the first rule to reintegrating fragments of yourself is by identifying whom you are basically fragmented within. So people that we interact with, partners, family, friends, the majority of our major fragmentation is, of course, with our family. But it is our job to take back our life force energy from that interaction. Life force energy is the holographic projection of your own soul in this matrix, in other words. So you need to take back those energetic aspects of yourself and bring it back to your whole. Now, before you do that, the invitation is that you become aware of what was it that triggered you in this interaction, number one. Number two, what does your child self need? Whether you're coming back to a memory that happened last week or a memory of you as a child, this child self, the most innocent, pure expression of yourself, is the one that is most connected with their emotions and with their needs. As we grow up from childhood to adulthood, we become, again, disconnected. We become programmed, indoctrinated with thought forms and programs of separation. So our child self innately knows what it needs, what it requires. So the first rule to reintegrating fragments of ourselves is to work with the child self, because the child self knows. And it's very interesting that the difference between a child self and an adult self is that usually the adult self is quite disconnected from their emotions and from their needs. And I would like to invite you to notice this. Unless you're someone that's been really working with your awareness of your emotions and your traumas, a lot of us, some of us, we have such a hard time even identifying our emotions. And that's because we've been so disconnected from ourself. So the child self will identify for you in this moment. That need is the answer to the perception caused from that traumatic. With new understanding, you have the ability of learning what this human body needs in order to rebalance itself from those traumas, from those traumatic moments. So I want you to visualize listening to a child, and you're going to provide the child with what it needed. Some of you are more visual, some of you feel things, some of you hear things, some of you see things. Use whatever tools you have to provide the child with everything that it needed. This child is an extension, a holographic extension of yourself. But if you heal this child, your body will heal. Okay? In other words, the emotional triggers that happen as a result of the trauma that that child experienced is what is cyclically cycling in your daily life. And the moment that you fix it and heal it, less and less that trigger will affect you, okay? Because you have learned, you have understood how to balance from that unbalance that was happening through the trigger, right? Trigger is triggering pain body, it's triggering lack, feelings of not having something. And so this awareness is incredibly powerful. Such a very simple technique that is incredibly powerful. So as you see this child, you're going to provide it with everything that it needed. And once you do, you're going to take a look at the contractual agreements that you have with the person that you've experienced the trauma with. So go ahead and take a look at that person. You're going to shine your crown light on top of them, and you're going to see the contracts. We worked with contracts yesterday, right? And we're going to go deeper into that topic. But whatever contract you see with them, you dissolve. The contract that's being presented to you in this moment is the contractual agreement that is made between you and the other person, mirroring the lesson that needs to be addressed in this experience. So what you're dissolving is basically the cause and effect that created the program and contract between you, these two souls. Okay? And again, don't forget, we are all fragmented. We are all experiencing fragmentation. So this is where you begin to notice that they are your mirrors. And we can then gently come into a state of understanding that compassionate. It allows us to apply compassion because we now see ourselves and they see themselves within us through these experiences. Okay? So anyway, this is how you can clear this. So go ahead and visualize destroying that contract completely. And the way that we cut cords is actually, you're going to release it on their end, your cord connecting to them. You're releasing it on their end. And what the cords actually look like are like maybe roots of a tree. It's multiple cords or tentacles, you can imagine, that are interconnected with more than one of the organs, chakra systems in the multidimensional body. So this is where your awareness is going to be trained over time. At first, it might be hard for you to connect with your body if you're very disconnected. Most of you that I do sessions with, you immediately feel where in your body you're connected. So in this moment, you're going to visualize pulling out those cords that are connected to your body, and don't stop until you know that it's completely out, okay? Because some of you doubt yourself and you're like, oh, I'm not sure. I think I see something. I think I don't. If you think you see something or you think you still connected somehow, keep going until you know that you're completely disconnected. That's how you begin to train your intuition and your ability to work on this level. So go ahead and release those cords that you have with them. And then very important, you inhale to take back your life force, okay? You are bringing back the fragment of yourself from this person into your body. And you're also, as you exhale, releasing, because everything is balanced exchange. There's no such thing as taking someone's energy that's going into the dark or imbalanced arts of working in energy. Must always have balance. So when you take back your energy, you give back their energy and allow them to choose what they wish to do with that. When you cut cords with people, they will probably become aware energetically somehow. They're not going to directly know what happened. But as you heal your vibrational frequency and the patterning that's happening in your life, you're also helping them become aware of those experiences. So, I mean, I've even had friends and family that call me after I cut cords with them and say, hey, I just wanted to check with you, see how you're doing. And it's they have a dream or they have an experience where they remember things that have happened in the past and they become aware and they're like, I wanted to apologize for something that happened then, or I wanted to clear the air about this, or whatever it is. This is just a very simple example. You notice how it affects you in your life, but it's a very powerful practice that allows us to confirm that when we work on the highest level, we are really truly affecting our whole organism of the human race. Okay, so go ahead and visualize that you're going to clear all that out, and as you release that completely, you're just going to breathe. And what you're going to do now is focus on that child again, and that child is actually the fragmentation of your soul. So you are going to take that child back into your body. You're going to notice that their state has changed because you undid the contractual agreements and you cleared out aspects of yourself that no longer are in alignment with those programs. So take that child back, breathe the child back in. This is the fragment of your soul. And you are working on more planes than one. You can do this, and you should do this, with fragments of yourself that are extraterrestrial, that are in dream time, all the time. This cleaning has to happen so that little by little we are recovering our fragments in order to come back into that white light. Very good. So now that you've taken that back, you're going to clear your space. We're going to eliminate all of these negative emotions or whatever came up. Just clear it out of your space. Come back into neutral state. You're going to open up the root chakra back into a balanced state. Spinning it if you like. Clear it out. The sacral chakra, open it back up. The solar plexus, open it back up. The heart chakra, bring it back into balance. The throat chakra, bring it back into balance. And the third eye, bring it back into balance. Very good. And you're going to go up to your crown. You're going to send it up to the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13. Go ahead and activate the higher levels of your body, okay? Always, we want to see the world from up here. We don't want to be down here. We want to be up here because it allows us to take a look at things from an observer state instead of fragmenting further. When we're in the first 3 chakras, when we're in the feeling body, we continue fragmenting, okay? Notice that. Unless you're in control of your emotions. So your ability to be in control of your emotions is by being in this state of observation, okay? So you can come back into the room. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I know this was a really heavy one. This is a heavy meditation. And I know that you guys are going to take what I taught and probably extend it into a longer meditation. Sometimes I can spend 3 hours on some of these things because, you know, we do have very traumatic experiences in our life and we need to understand what is true from there. So that's how we begin our journey to understand our own truth. Your truth is you coming into that white light and helping the collective also. You're opening space for the rest of us to have permission to come into our own truth as well. So thank you so much for joining me, and I love you, and I'm so sorry that this morning's meditation didn't go. I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning of the meditation, but we had technical issues with putting the live out, and so we decided to make it a 2-day event for next weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And Trisha is going to put on her channel on 90-degree turns the information for where to link into that, okay? And I'll probably put it here on a window to go to her channel, and you guys can sign up for that. One day it'll be on her channel, the next day it'll be on mine. So thank you so much. I love you so much all. Have an amazing, amazing week tomorrow, and stay in a high vibration, positive, owning your body. You are the master of your body and this entire soul that you are, okay? So apply that. Oh, my love. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining. Love you, Diona, John, Krista, Cherie. Hi. Wahid, it's so good to see you. Tatiana, hi. Oh, my God. Ina, Ranjan, hi. Jose, so good to see you. Megan, Cedric. Love you guys so much. There's so many of you. I'm going to reply to your comments in a moment. Take care.